Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Nykirk, the director of the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at NKU. And we are live from NKU in the Student Union. We have an audience with us, but we also want to welcome all of you who are joining us virtually. I hope you have a cup of coffee and are informed by the next hour as we proceed with the Northern Kentucky Forum. It is kind of the nature of the pandemic and maybe the post-pandemic, whatever it is that we're exactly in, that people are still trying to figure out whether they want to be with us in person or virtual. So we're doing hybrid events, and we have a pretty substantial hybrid or virtual audience this morning. So welcome to all of you. Those of you who are joining us virtually, there is a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, please put it there. We'll get to questions for our panelists toward the end of our hour together. The forum is a collaboration of the Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement at NKU with the three public library districts in Northern Kentucky, the Boone, Kenton, and Campbell County Public Libraries. And our intention is to foster civic dialogue in our community. Let you know that a couple of upcoming events on May the 5th in the morning at the Boone County Library. We will have Matt Ruther, who is the state demographer, to talk about the new census results. Those inform not only redistricting for legislative districts, but also are used by a lot of government agencies and nonprofits in grant writing. So that forum will be, I think, of particular interest to that audience, but really to everybody. So if you can join us on May the 5th and on May the 18th, roughly 24 hours after the May primary, we will have a dialogue with two Democrats and two Republicans to analyze the results of the primary and to look ahead to November, the November election, and that will be moderated by Dr. Ryan Salzman, who teaches political science at NKU and happens to be with us this morning. Ryan, good morning. And if you go to nkyforum.org, you can see more details on that and RSVP. Both of those events will be hybrid, so you can join us in person or by the Zoom webinar function. This morning, I know you wake up each morning and see the news from Ukraine, and it's heart-wrenching for all of us, but I think particularly heart-wrenching for our panelists today. And we have three people with us this morning with deep roots in Ukraine and are part of the NKU family. And so we want to hear from them so that we might understand the situation a little better. And with us this morning is Alina Yeva, and Alina teaches, or she directs the Center for Student Excellence in the College of Business. I think you also teach some classes here. So yes, and Bo Wehovavanuk, and Bo is the Chief Information Officer. So if he'd just gotten here a little earlier, he could have helped me connect to my Wi-Fi, but we managed. So thank you, Bo. And Nazli Mamedova is an attorney and a graduate of Chase College of Law, does a lot of work in immigration, on immigration cases, and also, excuse me, is very active right now in Cincy for Ukraine, which is doing a number of events to raise awareness and has some fundraisers coming up that she can tell you about. Mostly those efforts are involved in getting money to get medical supplies to Ukraine, I believe. So let's get started. And again, if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. I will monitor those and we'll ask our panelists when we get to that point. But we're going to start. Well, Lena, if you don't mind, just a little more introduction of yourself and your roots in Ukraine.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for organizing. My name is Alina Pilayeva. I'm originally from Ukraine. I've lived in Ukraine for about 23 years before I came to US. I grew up there. I went to school there. And you can see it's gonna get a little bit emotional, but it's okay. We can get through it. So I don't have as much family there anymore. Most of my family is already here. My parents are here, my sister's here, but we are definitely still connected to friends and family in Ukraine.
Oh.
Morning, everybody. I'm still trying to catch breath from running earlier. So my name is Bohdan Mykhovanyuk. I go by Bo. I was born in Kiev, Ukraine. My mom, well, until recently still resided in Kiev. I have grandma that lives in Western Ukraine. And, I have been in the United States since 1997, so it's been quite a while now. And, I find the United States my home, but obviously I have close roots and connections to Ukraine, and it's very difficult to see the atrocities that's happening there right now.
Hello everyone, my name is Nazli Mamedova, and I have a lot of family still left in Ukraine. Also, like Alona, not immediate family, but like my cousins, my grandmother, my aunts and uncles are still in Ukraine. This conflict has been particularly hard because my mom's family are Crimean Tatars, and after the history of the history of Russian aggression goes back to 1942 when Crimeans, Tatars were deported from Crimea overnight and resettled in Central Asia. That's why I was born actually in Central Asia, but went back and lived in Ukraine in one of the places, Melitopol, where the mayor was actually kidnapped by Russian forces, and then lived in Crimea. So my mom's family in 2014, when Crimea was taken by Russians, some of them have relocated to Kiev, and now this is literally a third time they have to run away from Russia and Russian aggression. So this has been happening, and this has been very devastating on not just our family, but Ukraine in whole.
Leslie, I wonder if I could just keep you talking for a minute. And most of us are experiencing this as we watch the news and talk about it with friends and with whatever historical references we have, and including just wondering how can such a thing happen in the 21st century. Each of you must watch the news on a daily basis and wonder if you'll see somebody you know or a building that you know. Could you just talk a little more about this experience from the perspective of you and your family and friends?
Absolutely. We keep in touch on a daily basis. Thankfully, there's still internet, and WhatsApp messaging and other means of communication. But we keep in touch with our families and friends. And my involvement with Cincy for Ukraine is an organization that we opened in Cincinnati the day after war. We're like, we need to do something. There has to be some kind of actions that we can take because we are here in safety and we feel really guilty. We can't help much there. So one of the means of coping with that feeling was, let's do something on this side. And because of Cincy for Ukraine, we actually got through and gathered a large network of Ukrainians in Ukraine who we work with there and keep in touch and receive the news firsthand from about what's happening in Ukraine. And it is, I think, on every single person's mind for the past few days that what's happening in Mariupol. And there have been people who are still there and were able to get out in the past few days because of the organized evacuations, but still so many people trapped in the city, specifically steel plant, that are unable to get out. And it has been very difficult. There has been a lot of sleepless nights and days because of the time difference, but we are trying to as I said earlier, the best way to cope with all that is we're trying to help as much as we can.
Maybe this is a good time, if you don't mind, let me just stay with you for a minute to talk on NKY for Ukraine. How did that come together? What sort of activities have happened so far? And I think there's a fundraiser coming up in a couple of weeks. Just give us a little NKY for Ukraine background, please.
Absolutely. So this is very interesting. We have a Facebook group, Russian-speaking women in Cincinnati, and it's women from all post-Soviet, and everyone is there. So the day the war happened, several of us who are Ukrainian Americans got together and were like, we need to organize a protest. And we organized a protest literally the next day in Loveland, Ohio, and there's so many people who showed up to support this, to show their support. News came in, and we did not expect any of that. So the next day we were like, all right, we're going to organize on the Fountain Square. We got the mayors involved and the representatives from the offices in Ohio, and we have a sister cities project in Cincinnati, and Kharkiv, Ukraine, is our sister city. They got involved. So NKY for Ukraine was born right after, and we're like, we need to organize. One of the big goals is to collect or funds or items of the medical supplies, and we have already shipped 2 tons, 4,000 pounds, to Ukraine since the war has started. Most of it is medical supplies, tourniquets, first aid kits, some sleeping bags for people, boots and things like that. But we do concentrate on medical supplies and any other help to first responders, really. We have several fundraisers coming up, but one of the biggest ones will be on May 9th. And great way to buy your Mother's Day gift, right? Buy a ticket. It will be Pierogies for Peace. So 35 plus restaurants in Cincinnati, including Jeff Ruby's, Chef Jose Salazar, Chef John Rivera are participating. So if you would go to cincychefs.com, that's where you will be able to see the information, the restaurants that are participating. I do know that drinks are included in your ticket, and it's you can eat all you can eat. So. But do please come and participate in the fundraiser. The money will be going to NKY for Ukraine and the World Central Kitchen. So World Central Kitchen has been very, very essential on the ground in Ukraine. We have one American Ukrainian from Cincinnati area who went before the war to Kharkiv to see his grandmother. He stayed there after war broke down, and now he is our contact and a volunteer there, and we do the logistics through him of delivering the aid to Ukraine. And World Central Kitchen got involved with him also, so now he's helping in delivering meals throughout the Kharkiv region to both territorial defenses, civilians, and the army. So it has been amazing support in terms of volunteers in Ukraine itself and the volunteers here. And our Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati community has been amazing at supporting the efforts also.
Thank you. So there's one way we can help, just to take note of that. Bo, if I could kind of take the same question to you, talk about the impact of the war on you, your family, and friends, and have you been able to have conversations with family and friends in Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, my family is fairly small, my mom and grandma. So as grandma, she is in a village in western Ukraine. There's no really easy way to contact her. With my mom, originally she was in Kiev. And it was very difficult and challenging talking to my mom because she was obviously very scared. Constantly she heard different, explosions, shelling, rockets flying everywhere. She had a hard time sleeping. Eventually, I did talk to her and kind of encourage her to leave the town, and she did. She was leaving when she was in a cab to get to like a vans that would take her to another city. There were more shelling going on and flying above the cab, and she was very scared because she was afraid that it's going to hit them as well. So it's been a really hard experience. All my mom's belongings, everything is in Kiev, her apartment. She had really hard time parting with that stuff. I mean, it's all her life is there. She eventually went to Western Ukraine for a little bit, and now she's in Bulgaria. And even now I talk to her, and she keeps on bringing up how she maybe should go back to Kiev because of all her stuff. And I'm trying to explain to her that, Mom, what you're gonna do? You're not gonna be able to save the stuff. If somebody wants to take it away, I mean, you're not gonna be able to stop it. Or if missile gonna hit it, it's gonna hit, and then you're gonna be there, and it's not ideal. So it's been really challenging from that standpoint. As far as friends, I really did not stay in touch much. A lot of my friends actually ended up living outside of Ukraine. But the few people that I talked to, obviously it's been very, very tough on them. They're joining forces and they're trying to, defend Ukraine.
So, Bo, in your mother's instance, when you're leaving, how do you know where to go for safety and to find a way there? Just it's not a small thing to just pick up and go to somewhere and to know where you can go to be safe.
Right. Well, with my mom, a lot of it was also kind of being open-minded to actually moving on, because she didn't want to leave things behind. And there are a few times that her friends offered her to take her outside of the city, but she needed to act quick, and my mom was very undecisive about it. So we did talk, and I said, "Hey, Mom, you have to be ready. You have to be pre-packed." And originally, a lot of people were going to Western Ukraine just because there was very little fighting there, and very little missile strikes. There were a lot of volunteer groups that would organize minivans, buses, where you get out to a little city and they take you to a different location. So my mom went to a town called Rivne, which is somewhat towards west of Ukraine. And the only reason she went there because she had some friends in the general area to help her out. Once she got there, she was very excited because she said that life appeared almost normal. People were going outside, stores were open, which to her at the time it was an interesting phenomenon because in Kiev it's already been a war zone. Shortly after she got there, I think Russians did hit a TV tower, I believe, there in Rivne. And my mom still wanted to stay there, but I did encourage her to leave. Originally, I was trying to explain to her it's better to go to Poland, just because Rivne is much closer to Poland. But my mom was set on Bulgaria, and there were some buses that were going to Poland and Bulgaria, and her friends helped her get a ticket and getting her on a bus, and essentially that was her journey there.
Alina, if I could kind of take that same question to you, family, friends, what is the impact of what's happening?
Of course, I can relate to all the stories that were shared here. It's kind of similar. It's all the same devastation. It's completely incomprehensible. But the conflict itself is very complex. So, as I mentioned, my parents are from Russia. I don't know if I mentioned it. They're from Russia. They were born in Russia. They were raised in Russia. They spent a lot of time in Russia. About when they were 30, that's when they moved to Ukraine and started their life. We were born there, my sister and I. And they still have a lot of roots. My uncle is still in Russia, in Moscow actually, with his family. And when the conflict has begun, we could not talk anymore. Yesterday was my cousin's birthday, and I just texted her happy birthday, and that was it. Usually we would have a conversation, we would talk about things that are happening, but nowadays we can talk only about maybe weather and just happy birthday, and that's all. So it definitely has been difficult. So in also coming back to complexity of the conflict, that I identify myself as Ukrainian American, but my parents as Russian Americans. So it's, and again, even though they have Ukrainian citizens and they are completely against this war, but because the country has been, as Natalie said, attacked, and it has a lot of history, so it's very easy to, I guess, judge people in Russia, which they should be, but there's so much propaganda that is going in their ears, and they don't have access to anything. I am not justifying anything. I'm not saying that all those people in Russia who definitely support Putin, they are in the wrong, absolutely. And when we're coming to my uncle, I think he's just, I don't know if he's brainwashed. We still don't know how they truly feel about the conflict, because when the war began, they just stopped talking to us, and they erased all the previous conversations that we had with them. So that's the situation with my uncle. And I do want to share a couple of more stories with you from my friends. So I have a friend, Natasha, who was my best friend when I was in Ukraine, when I was living in Ukraine. She has a 16-year-old son, and she has a husband. She's a designer. She started her business a while ago, about 20 years ago. She became this entrepreneur, and her business was going well. And of course, the war began. When the war began, she was in between a rock and a hard place. She didn't know what to do. So she had to leave all of her belongings and she fled to Turkey. That was the best kind of way to go about it for her. And now she's in limbo, even though she can go to Canada. My sister helped her out with documents, set up everything, but she really cannot go because her husband is in Ukraine in military. So now she has to take care of the son, has to find out where to get the next meal from, and also think about her husband and her belongings. And I know we come back to belongings, and I know Bo mentioned belongings, but that's important. That's what you worked all your life for. So it's completely understandable when people don't want to leave, even though there is a chance that they can be shelled or worse. And another story that I would like to share with you is my mom's cousin, Valentina. Valentina is disabled. She cannot go anywhere. I don't know how you got through it without getting there. My goodness, that's okay. So she's disabled. She cannot leave. She has to stay. What do you do?
Thank you. Just for a moment, I wonder if each of you, and whoever wants to go first is fine. It would be fine. But just take us into Ukrainian culture a little bit. This is a nation we've heard about, but we don't know a lot. And Leslie, you mentioned the food. But what is it that you love about Ukrainian culture? Take us to Ukraine with some thoughts about that.
One piece of Ukrainian culture that I absolutely love is welcoming. So people in Ukraine are very welcoming and warm, and honestly, right now it's a time of war, but normally, and I think even in times of war, they're still trying to be very happy. So folklore song singing is a very important tradition in Ukraine. And there's some beautiful, beautiful songs that are sang in Ukraine. Food is a staple of Ukrainian culture. Vareniki, and other голубцы and other types of Ukrainian food is amazing. This is a place where I'm in my early life for first time tried a watermelon that was actually salted and marinated, and I remember those experiences and those first things that I've tried that were unusual to me. Ukraine has a rich history because on the Ukrainian territory it wasn't just Ukrainians who lived. Throughout the history there was a large Jewish population also, so a lot of food that was Jewish really also kind of integrated into Ukrainian cuisine. Crimea, again, the peninsula that is connected to Ukraine and is Ukrainian, in their traditions of more Turkish type of food, and they speak their own language, which is very close to Turkish language. Those traditions, Ukraine has gathered all of that, and everyone lived very peacefully. And going back to what Alina said about, propaganda and brainwashing, it is so strange, and I absolutely do agree with what she's saying in terms of families. A lot of families in Ukraine, you need to understand this, are mixed families. There is a lot of Russian, Ukrainian families, a lot of mixed population, and the conflict happening has torn down those families apart. And there's so much propaganda on the Russian side, and I think one of the biggest things we need to fight is that propaganda and misinformation, that Russia is doing a good deed, that they're Nazifying, so removing Nazis from Ukraine when the president of Ukraine is Jewish, so which sounds very ridiculous, but so many Russians do believe that. I'm sorry, going back to Ukrainian culture, also pisanki, that's another thing. We just had Easter, and pisanki is an art of decorating eggs. And it has been going on for centuries, and it's beautiful, amazing, and it's coming back here in the United States. We had amazing support during the Easter here, and the Orthodox Easter coming up next weekend. So, but there's a lot of classes and workshops around that. So that's another piece of the Ukrainian culture. Vyshivanki, the traditional clothing with a traditional, what would you call it?
Embroidery.
Embroidery, yeah, traditional embroidery on it. That's a piece of clothing. And I think another thing to keep in mind, traditionally, the image of women in Ukraine. Women in Ukraine are very strong women. So that image of women in Ukraine is also part of the culture. Bread making women, women taking care of their families, women weaving baskets. That is part of the Ukrainian culture that's very important to keep and preserve. I think because Ukraine has so many different ethnic groups that lived on Ukrainian land, it has a very rich culture and has encompassed a lot of it. And we are hoping that this destruction will end and we will be able to rebuild Ukraine back even better.
Now I'm gonna get emotional.
Issues.
I agree. Ukrainian people are very friendly, fun-loving people, a lot of hard workers, very innovative. As we can see, there's this conflict to some degree. It mixes a lot of different cultures, a lot of different people, and they always lived in peace, respecting each other. Lives between Ukrainians and Russians that interviewed quite a bit because of Soviet Union, and to some degree it almost came as a shock when Russia did attack, because I think a lot of people want disbelief. How can Russia attack? All the troops were gathering on the border. Well, maybe some type of statement, maybe it's some sort of bluff. political pressure, but nobody, well, at least I don't want to say nobody, but I don't think a lot of people believed this actually will happen. So, it's quite shocking. So, yeah, it's sad to see Ukraine like this, but I think Ukraine will come out of this stronger than ever. Ukraine is a very rich country in natural resources, and I believe especially now, since Ukraine getting so much attention, once Ukraine becomes victorious, eventually it will be built out and become one of the stronger countries in Europe to some degree. Now, a little bit step back about propaganda and belongings. Another reason why belongings are so special to a lot of people in Ukraine is because traditionally a lot of people do not believe in things like banking, right? So a lot of money are literally kind of stored under mattress. So when we're talking about belongings, yeah, it's all the stuff that you collected over your lifetime. And, stuff that I collected even over the last few years, that's useless. I have a hard time parting with. But, you collect it over a lifetime, you have a lot of emotional attachment. But on the top of that, you have all your life savings there as well. And generally, you'd be scared to take those savings with you because you're traveling who knows where. You'll take some money, but you're not going to take it all. And that stuff would likely be gone by the time you come back. Talking about propaganda, just a couple days ago, I got a phone call from a former coworker of mine who is Russian. He's been here in the United States for quite a while now. He lives in California. And, he says it's surreal with what's going on in Russia because Putin has a tremendous support. Support is getting stronger and stronger. And he was telling me that his wife was actually called her cousin over in Russia. And, they had conversation, and he said conversation was useless. Cousin, didn't want to listen to anything. Essentially, cousin kept on saying that, well, Ukraine was going to invade and attack Russia. And, the only reason Russians kind of entered Ukraine because if they didn't, 4 hours afterwards, Ukraine was scheduled to start attacking Russia, to invade Russia. And, obviously it sounds surreal. Again, Ukraine is a very peaceful nation and obviously would not go after countries size of Russia. But that's what they hear on TV, that's what they hear, from Russian social media, and they genuinely believe that, Ukraine was threat or is threat to Russian Federation and Russian culture.
Absolutely. And it was, if I may add to that, and I'm going to come back to culture. So dehumanizing was so easy for Putin and his bosses, or for his propaganda machine. Just dehumanizing Ukrainians. How can a whole country be Nazis? Or now it's a new thing, they're devil worshippers, or whatever, fill in the blank. How crazy is that? There are 42 million of Ukrainians who live, well now it's of course less, but before the war it was 40 to 42 million of Ukrainians who live in Ukraine. And yes, all of them have ties to Russia. They may have even 2 passports, Russian and Ukrainian. So, but dehumanizing people and actually making them look not human, I think that's what's helping his machine, definitely. And it's extremely sad, but what can we do? We can talk about it, we can try to convince people, we can reach out, we can talk to Russians, but now they are not on Facebook, I think Telegram is kind of popular. Mm-hmm. So trying to not really prove your point, but talk to them and try to give facts, and they will be resistant, but maybe somebody will hear it. But talking is definitely important because shutting down is very easy. And in my case with my uncle, that's what we can do as of now, because at the beginning of the war when we started talking and my uncle started making kind of funny comments about, you have all the Nazis there in Ukraine. It was very shocking. He's highly educated. My family is highly educated. My uncle is highly educated. Cousin. I mean, they live in Moscow. You would think it's a hub of just everything, but they were completely brainwashed by propaganda. But coming back to culture, if I could describe Ukrainian culture in one word, it's bright. Bright colors in everything, in food, in clothing. Borscht is one of them. I'm not sure. Maybe some of you have heard it. Maybe some of you have tried it. It's a very common and a recurring dish in my neighborhood or our household. It's a beet soup. If you haven't had it, it's an experience. Let's put it this way. So you either love it or hate it. There's nothing in the middle. And if you have a chance to try Ukrainian food, please do that. There is a awesome international store. They actually crossed out Russian food store in where is it going?
It's in Montgomery, Ohio.
Montgomery, yeah.
Yes, in Montgomery. So if you want to look it up, it's an international food store now, okay? It's not Russian. They have a lot of food, a lot of authentic food, a lot of food actually from Ukraine. I actually bought a cake, Kievsky tort, from there recently. It was wonderful. So if you have a chance to try it, if you're ever in New York, go to Veselka. It's one of the Ukrainian restaurants that is very popular, and they serve Ukrainian food in there. In Ukrainian culture, it goes back like thousands of years. Even though the country, independent country, we became independent only like in 1991. Because before it was occupied by so many different forces, but Ukrainian culture has been growing for, again, thousands of years. In the country, again, it's only 30 years old. So, and we will persevere, and we will win. We as Ukrainians, I do believe that at some point it will end this. I don't even know how to describe or how to name this situation, this invasion, this war, and it's so unjust. It's so stupid. There's no winning. What is Putin gonna do? So let's say they invade the whole country. Ukraine will never give up. I don't see it as Ukraine. I don't see it happening. So there's always gonna be resistance. There's no winning for them really in Ukraine. I truly believe in that.
And I think to what Alina said, part of the winning, we do have May 9th event Pirogis for peace, but then after we win, we're gonna have Vareniki, which is Pirogi but Ukrainian Vareniki for victory. I think Ukrainian spirit is so strong. We do know that about 4 million people have left Ukraine, but there's so many stayed, and especially men, and they are defending their country. So I don't see Russia winning this either. There will be constant fighting, and Ukrainians love their country. They love their land. They will be fighting this. This has been through the history going to the, Kazakhs and Elizaveta, where the Ukrainians were defending their lands and their territory. And this has been going on nonstop. So I do think they will prevail and we will win. And hopefully we will be getting back to normal. But that goes back to what Bogdan also was saying, the mom not wanting to leave. My cousins were very reluctant to leave Ukraine, and one's still there because of her husband and family. My grandmother not gonna leave, she's 90. But they don't also really want to leave. They want to get to safety because they're scared, but they don't want to immigrate. So they want to be able to come back. As an immigration attorney, I talk to Ukrainians on a daily basis, and they're like, okay, so we get somewhere. We get to, let's say, Spain or Europe, or get to United States or Canada. But then how can we go back? Then their number one question is, how can we go back home when the war ends? So a lot of them want to go back home, to their homes, to their belongings, to their culture, to see their relatives and friends.
Yes, this invasion, ironically for the Russian government, instantly united Ukraine like it never was united before. And that's amazing to see. It is emotional for me to even think about it. It's tragic as to why it occurred, but it is nice to see Ukrainians come together as one single nation and putting all other differences aside.
Well, you said almost in passing a little while ago when Ukraine is victorious. When Ukraine is victorious, and Nazli and Elena, you've both also spoken to that, and I think Americans have been inspired by the resilience in the fight. And maybe at the beginning, it seemed, well, if Putin does this, it's over because it's a superpower going against a small nation. And yet that's not what's happened. Could you all just speak to that resilience and determination and the sense that we will win this? Where does that come from? And did you expect it?
No, I mean, this war is full of surprises. I really did not expect that Ukraine will withstand Russian force so well. I'm happy that they did, obviously. I think part of the Ukrainian spirit is basically defending their homeland is very strong. Unfortunately, Ukraine being in the midst of different battles for many, many centuries, right? A lot of Napoleon army froze and lost their lives in Ukraine, around Poltava area. During German invasion, it shocked Germans because Ukrainians were burning their own homes, burning, food supplies, everything, that way they don't fall into enemy hands. And, for a lot of Western culture, that they couldn't even imagine that, how you're gonna burn everything you have just in order not to get in somebody else's hands. Insurgency was always very strong in Ukraine, World War II and even before that. So I do not see Russia winning long term. Yes, they can use a lot of weapons, they can destroy Ukraine, they can wipe a lot of cities, and it's tragic, and I don't want that happening. I don't want a conflict to be prolonged. But even if the conflict is prolonged, even if Russia effectively takes control of Ukraine, that insurgency will live on, and eventually, Ukraine will succeed. So that's more on the feelings and emotional side. But then purely from number perspective, I mean, it's in order to occupy a country, I think you ideally want, I don't know, at least 10 people per armed soldiers per 1,000 population, and I don't think Russia in a position to accomplish that. So as far as even military goes, if you traditionally statistics, if you want to invade another territory, another country, then you need about 3 soldiers against 1 soldier of territory trying to invade. Again, numbers are not there for Russia either. Ukraine is getting a lot of support from the West, which is great. I mean, I'm hoping that there will be even more support. So as long as that support is coming, I think Ukraine is going to be in a pretty good shape. So.
Go ahead, please.
If I may, just a little bit more about patriotism. That was one of the most shocking things for me, how I felt about it when the invasion has begun. Because I have very complicated, relationship with Ukraine. I left for a reason. I left to seek opportunities because my life in Ukraine maybe was not the best and I didn't have a lot of opportunities. But it was 20 years ago. I didn't realize how country changed and how better it became and how westernized it became. Because I grew up in Soviet Union, I think all of you can relate to that. The Soviet Union was not a good situation for many of us. Now that I live in U.S. and I see all the benefits of not Soviet Union. So when seeing people getting together, when the shelling happens, my husband and I watch this channel that's called Suspilne Kharkiv, and that's where it's a channel where regular people just go outside and film what's happening in their city. And I'm from Kharkiv, a sister city of Cincinnati, and we watch this, every night, including tears, sometimes because some videos are extremely difficult to watch. But seeing people when the shelling happened and the bombing happened, and seeing them coming out and cleaning it up and keeping up with it, my goodness. It definitely is one of the most wonderful things to see, this patriotism and the human spirit. moving on.
They're trying to live as during the war as if they were living before, and they're trying really hard, and I think it's helping them to keep up with their spirits and keep fighting.
I'm going to just see if there's a question in the audience, and remind the virtual audience, if you put your questions in the Q&A, we'll get those asked. But does anybody have something you'd like to ask?
Questions?
Yes.
So President Zelensky is obviously getting a lot of attention for how he's handling the war, and just curious to know what you thought of him as he was running, since he came from the entertainment industry first, and now what you think of him now.
So I'll just, I don't know if that, make sure the question is audible to the virtual audience, but reflections on President Zelensky
So I personally was excited when he was running. I follow Ukrainian politics closely. The previous president was not that great. And one of the things that a lot of people might not know, President Zelensky actually has a law degree. So before he became a comedian and got into the comedy shows, and then, you know, and just whole television thing with the movies and things, he had a legal degree. So he is an attorney also. I don't know if he's licensed or not, but he does have a legal degree. And one of the things that was different about him is he was more open, more innovative. He is younger, which Ukraine hasn't seen a younger president in ages. And this was all very inspiring for Ukraine. So the way he talked was different, and you know, it also always helps in post-Soviet countries if the person who is coming to the power already has established wealth. The previous president did too, but it didn't really help. But at least with this one, he was promising to eradicate corruption, and he has been actually doing work towards it. And there has been a lot of changes in the country that are not just words, but actually visible to people. So this was very exciting to see, and it's even more exciting to see him standing strong for Ukraine. He had an opportunity to leave. We in the US offered to get him out of Ukraine into safety. He said no. A lot of people comparing him to young Churchill, right? For what he's doing for Ukraine. And I think it's amazing. But then if you look at Zelensky himself, if you look into his face, he has aged by at least 20 years. Just between those few weeks and months of war, he has aged so much. He's under a lot of pressure. And another unexpected people who came to kind of front lines of this war is brothers Klitschko, another famous figures in Ukraine who are two boxers, world-known boxers. They are brothers, and one of them is a mayor of Kyiv. He actually, a lot of people used to make fun of him and some other things because he wasn't politically savvy. But by him staying in Kyiv and his brother coming and helping when they could have gone anywhere in the world into safety, and supporting their land, their families, their motherland. This is amazing. I'm past there saying motherland because in Ukrainian it's actually fatherland. So it's a fatherland that they are fighting for. So yes, to answer the question, I think Zelensky is doing amazing now, but we also were very excited about him winning the elections at the time when he won.
Well, that's a great question. First of all, let me preface that when he ran, I did not really take a lot of time to do research and learn about him. I knew that he was a comedian, and that's pretty much it. So my kind of assumption and stereotypes were not the greatest. Again, Ukraine is an amazing country, but it also carries forward quite a bit of corruption since the Soviet Union, right? And a lot of people come to power, they want to change it, they want to eradicate corruption, but it's a system that works, and it's hard to change a system. System changes people, right? So I'm not saying I had any negative feelings about President Zelensky, but I also did not have any feelings that, oh my goodness, here's a person that's actually going to do something for Ukraine. Now, my opinion completely shifted after the war started. Maybe it's because he finally decided to grow a beard. No. But, I think he handled this situation in the best way possible, right? I realize that a lot of the things that he's doing are, calculated for PR, politics, etc., but it's exactly what's needed. It's exactly what's needed to motivate Ukrainians. It's exactly what's needed to apply somewhat of a pressure on the West to help Ukraine more. So I think he's been amazing, and my perspective of him completely shifted, and, I'm 100% supportive of him, and I think that's the best president that Ukraine can have. So.
Absolutely, and I'm kind of in the same boat with Bo. I didn't follow politics, Ukrainian politics. I'm very active in American politics because it's my home and that's where I belong. But of course, when the war started, I started following very, very much so. And I think if I'm thinking about my opinion, or if I'm thinking about my opinion of Zelensky, let me tell you just a little bit more about how it depends what camp you belong to. In terms of my parents, they have a completely different opinion of Zelensky than I do, and it's the generational gap. So for those of us who are a bit younger and who appreciate all the niceties that West has to give, and we see the progress, we see the way the world is supposed to move, not backwards but forward, we do appreciate him, I think, more than older generation, just like my parents. They see a lot of negatives, and they really grew up in Soviet Union era, and they loved it, or they love more things about it than, I'm just going to speak for all of us, we ever will. So, but of course, when the war began, his spirit and how he just, like a phoenix, he rised up and flew, and he's definitely showing how a president should behave in a difficult situation like that. And the fact that he never left Ukraine, even though there was so much talk, and of course on Russian news, he left the first day. No, he didn't. There were videos, and the Klitschko brother, there's so many examples. All the artists, the Ukrainian artists, I don't think many of them left. I saw artists performing on Khreshchatyk in Kiev on the main street when the war began. So again, coming back to the human spirit, and Zelensky showing how it's done politically, it's a hit and miss, just like with everyone. Nobody's perfect. He is not perfect. He's just a human. But if you had a chance to watch his interview with Jake Tapper, I think it was last weekend, it was wonderful. He was just, and he goes, I'm not a hero. And that's what I think I might appreciate the most about him. I'm not a hero, I'm just a human. I am a family man, and I am a patriot. I'm Ukrainian.
We're coming to the end of our time. I'm sorry it's gone so fast, but we have a question from the virtual audience, and it's a big one. In your opinion, has the U.S. government and NATO, by extension, done enough to help, or could have more been done by now?
Not enough. We can do more and better, and we need to do more and better. The conflict is not over. Russia is still invading Ukraine, still shelling them on a daily basis. And one of the biggest asks that Ukraine has been doing is to provide them with planes to cover the sky, or to provide them with the domes that Israel has to help to shield Ukraine from shellings. So one of the issues is that Ukraine is very, I think, organized on the ground, but in the sky they don't have any protection, and that's where Russia has been advancing a lot. And while NATO is helping, and we are helping, this is, I think, third aid that we have just approved to go to Ukraine. That has been recently in the news, third package of aid, and we are sending a lot of military equipment. It's still not enough because Ukrainian army is just so outnumbered against Russia. Russia is one of the largest militaries in the world, and I think Europe itself and NATO is just surprised that Ukraine is standing off this offensive and even making some advances in some areas. I hope we will do more. We need to keep this conversation going, and I think part of it is us being here today is that people do not forget the war is still happening, and I hate to call it war because it's literally an invasion, but invasion is still happening. And we can't just become desensitized or forget about it because it has been going on for over a month now. No, we need to be still being reminded about it and still trying to help.
I completely agree that the things that we should be doing is making sure we keep this relevant and don't get desensitized with what's going on, because in the news, after we hear things over and over, kind of like, oh, it's old news, what's going on now, somewhere else. So it's very critical for us to keep this message going and keep Ukraine relevant in our minds and our conversation, etc. Now, I am very grateful for what the United States done, as well as NATO, and for all the help that Ukraine received. There always could be more help, and some of the help was coming pretty slow. And today we spoke about Ukraine and war, invasion, genocide, widespread acts of terrorism in Ukraine. Now, it's a bigger issue than that. It's not about Ukraine. I mean, it's really a war against free world. And I think it's been going on too long. We allowed it to happen. We allowed Putin, for example, to go invade Georgia. It was in 2008, I think. And nobody said a thing. Yeah, it was not as big of a conflict. Russia walked in, and within a few days, they kind of took a piece of territory of Georgia. But that happened, and nobody said a word. What does it do to bully when you let it happen? Bully's going to get bolder. Bully's going to get stronger. Other bully's going to look at him or her and say, hey, we can join our forces, and we can be strong together. And that's why, this threat was going to the point where he felt comfortable to go and invade country of a size like Ukraine in Europe, middle of Europe, in this day and age. And I think even now, often we here in the United States, in other NATO countries, are reluctant to actually get involved because we're scared. Oh, they got nuclear weapon. Well, yes, they do. We're reluctant to provide some help. But at the end of the day, we have to realize the longer this drags on, the more dangerous this is going to become. He's going to be put in a corner. And what happens when somebody in a corner is there is no way out? So he's going to be using means available to him that's going to impact us much more than if we actually go and help right now. It would have been easier to help a while back and take care of this, but it is what it is. We're here now, and if we wait, it's going to get even worse. With weapons being provided to Ukraine, originally some of the weapons, Ukraine was told, no, you're not going to get those. Now those weapons being provided. So why did it take so long? Because we waited until something extremely bad happened before those weapons being provided. A lot of lives could have been saved. I know it sounds like an oxymoron. Guns save lives, but at the same time, in this particular case, weapons do help to save lives. So it would be good to see more immediate help, bigger help, and also, as much as I know it's not a popular opinion and not a good idea, but it might be time for other countries to step in and look at that, because again, it's not about Ukraine, it's about free world, and if this is allowed to happen, other countries are going to be doing the same thing. Countries like Iran, North Korea, why do they want to get nuclear weapon? Well, because they see if you have it, then nobody's going to touch you. So it's not, it's not, we can't allow for this to happen.
Very nicely put. Very little to add. That just remember, and it's never enough. Of course, we need, definitely Ukraine needs more help. And remember that propaganda machine is still working. It's working full force. So the earlier he stopped, the better it is going to be for all the countries in the long run. Because Russia, Ukraine, Europe. So it's like a gateway into Europe. Who's there to say that Poland is not next? I know they're NATO, but it's Russia. Who knows what they're going to do? So keeping the sanctions, putting more sanctions, and I know we're getting into complicated question about oil and all of that, and Germany can. Anyway, so it's a very complex issue, a geopolitical issue. So, but definitely, I appreciate how West responded and how Poland. Oh my goodness, how they just opened the borders. It was absolutely unbelievably amazing to see how people just opened their houses for refugee. That's been absolutely wonderful. But we need more. Yes.
And just to quickly add to this, there is a danger of us, United States, losing a lot of not just influence but also allies in Europe, is because there is some countries in Europe that now showing actually and gravitating more towards Russia and Putin, with like latest elections in some of the Eastern European countries, going and electing pro-Putin leaders. There is a danger of that. Additionally, if you look at post-Soviet Union, there is some countries, including Stans, that have been cooperating with Russia. So this invasion did not happen just by Russia. We must not forget that the Belarus is just as guilty of the bombing Ukraine and killing the civilians as Russia is. So a lot of times that gets lost because Russia is kind of big and we all like, oh, Russia, but Belarus is just as guilty of this invasion as Russia is.
Well, thank you all for being here in person and virtually. Our hour is up. I just want to say, Bo, Elena, Nasli, it's frankly been an honor to be with you. Thank you, and thanks for the reflections and the education. We're very appreciative, and if we could just thank them. There are some similar comments of gratitude in the chat from the virtual audience. Everyone, thank you for being with us, and tell you that there is an opportunity tomorrow night at NKU. Dimitri and Anna Sheilas, who are NKU graduates, graduated in 2005. Anna went on to play. They were in the School of Music, pianist, started in a music academy in Ukraine, came here and studied. Did a few concerts while they were here, and were fairly well known on campus, but they went to New York and have had a successful music career. They play together, they play four hands piano, and there's an album of their music that interprets on the piano Ukrainian music that's beautiful. If you have a streaming service, have a listen. But you can hear it live tomorrow night at Greaves Hall at 7 o'clock, and the ticket proceeds from that will go to support Ukrainian refugee relief through Refugee Connect or the Kentucky Refugee Ministry. So please come back to campus. Come to campus tomorrow night for that if you can. And again, thanks everybody for being with us, and we'll see you at the next forum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving us the floor. And Slava Ukraini!
Slava Ukraini!
Героям слава!
There we go.